Welcome, everyone. Welcome to actually the last session of this year's Impact AI webinar series. I can't believe it's already December. I feel like this year has flown by, especially when you're in the AI world. It feels like a blink of an eye. If you're new around here, my name is Iman Ubu. I'm your host. I'm also the co-founder of Vocable.ai. And as usual, I am joined by my lovely co-host, Stefan Brown from Impact AI, CEO of Impact AI. Stefan, say hi.
Hello, everybody. Hi.
So I'm actually really excited about this session because I think we couldn't have picked a better topic to wrap up this year's series because as we approach the end of the year, it's the perfect time to basically look at what the next frontier of AI is going to look like. And I'm sure many of you have heard that one of the most exciting and hyped up developments in AI now is Agentic AI or autonomous AI agents. And so today we're excited to welcome Jonas, who's the co-founder and CEO of Beam.ai to dig deeper into the topic and also the practical use cases of these AI agents. So Jonas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So before we dive into the topic, the much anticipated conversation, I'd love for you to take the floor and just give us a little bit of a background on your career path and also what inspired you to launch Beam.ai.
Yeah, absolutely. So a quick intro from my part. Yeah, so I grew up in Germany and then I went to Munich to study there at the Technical University.
It is not
And
Germany, or?
uh,
So you
I
left
am German.
Germany to Munich, yeah.
Uh, yeah, indeed. Wanted to experience like the proper beer, you know. It's like coming from Düsseldorf, only having alt beer. Yeah, like, let's go to Munich. Yeah. But no, I always loved also to be on the intersection of like engineering and business. Yeah, so I studied at the Technical University. And then I did CDTM, which is a study program that's very focused on entrepreneurship. And then, nonetheless, I kind of did a bit of a detour, had a look at consulting at McKinsey, decided, well, it's actually much more fun to build companies than to consult them. So I switched back to the other side and I joined Konux in Munich, early stage AI company, where we use data from sensors that we analyze with neural networks in like 2014, 15. And for us, that was super cool to see because we saw, hey, we can use AI and we can use it to solve really hard problems, and kind of sparked my interest, obviously, and my journey in that. However, I went to Berlin and said, well, let's found a company with Rocket Internet that went like this. So we were 120 people in 9 months in 7 different countries. And then the whole thing didn't really work out, but we kind of took the learnings out of that business and founded Razor Group, which turned into a unicorn and became quite big. And then after Razor, I did a bit of like the yoga meditation retreat stuff that you do in Berlin when you stay there for too long. But then it was like, hey, look, let's build again. Yeah. So I met with an old friend from CDTM, and we said AI is growing exponentially, humans are not. Yeah. So let's just rebuild humans. Yeah, it can't be that hard. Yeah. So let's try and see how far we can get. And this was in 22 before the whole ChatGPT hype. And then we started the company. Yeah. And in the beginning, it was a lot of testing and figuring out what to build. Yeah. And then we saw, hey, we can build these entities that we can use to automate work. Yeah. And then we just stick with it. Yeah. And kind of build and build and build. Yeah. And now we're here today.
So
Very cool.
So you thought about agents before even traditional AI was mainstream. I'm very curious about how that conversation went down initially, because I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of the agent talk has been kind of like a next step of traditional AI, but I'm curious how you went from jumping straight into the agents.
Yeah, so there are actually a couple of things that really shaped our thinking. So in 2015, there was a blog article, Wait, But Why? I don't know if you know the blog, yeah, but it's really good. The Road to Super Intelligence, yeah. And for us, this kind of was like the spark. Okay, and one day, like AI is going to be as good as humans, and then very shortly after, it's going to be much better than humans. Yeah? And kind of back then, it was the time of neural networks, and so we kind of saw, okay, well, this is already cool, but it's not as crazy. Yeah? And then really in 22, we kind of came back to it. Yeah? And then we tested around and we saw, hey, well, this is actually getting really, really good now. Yeah. So we can do stuff with it. Yeah. And then in the beginning, when we started the company, we didn't really have the plan to build agents, yeah, in like a process automation perspective. Yeah, but we wanted to build really, like we started with the visual aspects of humans. Yeah. So we built avatars and then we're like, okay, this is cool, but can we now give them job? Like, can we give them work to do? And then we realized, yes, we can. We can have them send an email. Then we're like, okay, now they can plan work. And then we're like, okay, this is really cool. And then the human simulacra paper came out last year, and then we're like, okay, let's call it AI agents. Let's put everything on agents, because that's going to be the next big thing. And then we had a also rough time kind of to make it actually work. But now it does work. Not in everything, but for a lot of things, it already works.
So
Interesting.
that was already quite a nice definition of an agent. Or so is that how you look at it? Or I mean, we hear this word over and over, and from so many people that have been also working with, let's say, Gen AI and Rex and multi-agent architectures this year. So when you define agentic AI or autonomous AI agents, is that like how you would call it, replace a process in a human way, or what would be your way of describing it for the audience?
Yeah. So I think maybe first there are a lot of definitions flying around, or like people use it in many different ways. And I think now it's becoming a lot of a marketing term as well. And everybody's like, oh, we build AI agents. Yeah, but it's really a conversational bot, that you now rebranded. And that's kind of cool as well. Yeah. I think really the core of agents is the word agency, to do something on somebody else's behalf. Yeah. It's like where the origin of the word comes from. Yeah. And so at the core of agents is like to do work, on somebody else's behalf. And this is really the core for us. And now we see this mostly in a context of like mimicking human work, because this is now what is possible. So kind of we also see one AI agent very similar to a human worker. This is how we use it, but always with the focus of actually getting work done.
Yeah, but it feels like this doing the work of a human is more like you copy it, but if you hear this word autonomous, it feels like it has more to it. Also, then it goes beyond just doing a process somebody did before, maybe, or and copy and make it better. Or
Yeah, I think ultimately, like there is this. So one of our co-founders also previously built autonomous cars with Cruise in the US, and they kind of went and essentially took the driver and were like, hey, look, we can automate the driver and we can have the car running autonomously. And then he called me one day and was like, hey, look, my job here is now done. It's on the street. What's next? And then we said, now let's do this for the knowledge worker as well. But really the notion of like ultimately autonomous agents is like you can do it end to end, without human intervention. If you take a co-pilot, it's like usually the frequency of the task is relatively low. So you do it for n equals 1, or more, and you need to guide it. The challenge in autonomous agents is now that you want to do this over like 10 steps or 6 steps or whatsoever, and you want to do it end to end. And that's really hard because there's a small margin of error in every step. So you need to get really good to make sure that it completely works.
And how does that, so then what would be the main difference, I would say technically speaking, between a co-pilot, like an AI co-pilot and an AI agent? How are they maybe trained differently or built differently in a way that makes the AI agents more autonomous and able to understand the nuances and, understand unpredictability and also make decisions in real time, versus a co-pilot, which is basically almost prompted every step of the way, right?
Yeah, I think the last sentence that you said like pretty much described it, right? In the co-pilot, I kind of inject something, and then I iterate with the co-pilot to get something done. And now within that, I can call like actions, and I might say, hey, look, now send that email. In the agent case, in the fully autonomous agent case, we just trigger the agent and we say, hey, you now get an email, and you just essentially have to make sure that at the end of it, let's say it's a sales order use case, that at the end of it, my sales order is in my SAP system and everything is checked and it's completely done. And in between that, I have a lot of different steps that I now need to be able, or the agent needs to be able to execute. And now that comes with a lot of challenges, obviously, because now the agent cannot ask in every second step, hey, what do you actually think I should be doing here? You need more autonomy. So the system needs to be much more reliable. It also needs to be much more accurate in order to get this done. And the agent needs to know, okay, where do I find information? Where can I retrieve information in case I don't have it? Because in the Copilot case, the agent can just ask, hey, look, I don't know like who to send it to. In the agent autonomous agent case, the agent needs to know where to find that information, for example, about the email. So it's a much more complex system. in the end, like the core of it, can be like built on similar technologies, but then when you come to it, it's very different in terms of architecture and how you build it.
But if you take this process you just described, how long would an agent need to kind of understand what it needs to do, and would it then also like optimize itself as more often as it does it? And I think Iman also said another very important word, taking decisions on the way. Is obviously when you cannot ask somebody what to do. I think that is something where you obviously need some feedback. Did you do it right? Was it the right decision or the best one to take? So what's the time you would say for such a process you just described to make this really work smoothly?
So like from, hey, we have the idea of doing a certain process up to like we get to 99 point something% accuracy. First, it depends. Second, a general rule of thumb is like 4 to 6 weeks. Like that is if this is a well-scoped environment. If you say I want to do the craziest stuff, then probably it's going to take longer. There are a couple of like limits always that we see. So number one is like I cannot make the agent endlessly complex and just say, hey, look, you are now getting 20 different systems that you can use. So you can send emails, you use SAP, but you also can browse the web, and then fourth, you do this, etc. There's a limit to the complexity that you can put in the agent. That's one of the main limitations. And the thing is, if you now like do it over and over again, you need to ensure that the reliability and the accuracy of the system works. And the reliability means essentially I need to be able to connect all of the tools. I need to be able to just make sure that every time my data flow through the whole process is actually working well, and going through. And my accuracy is now, is the agent able to take decisions as well as humans, or whatever your alternative is? So do I come to the same conclusion than somebody else who has been trained on this? And now this depends very much on obviously like how complex is that, and how we say it right now, we can do like the lower skilled white collar work, we can do incredibly well. And if you want to do incredibly difficult reasoning things, then it's hard. But we're getting there as well, step by step.
Interesting. In terms of how you foresee the adoption side of agents within enterprises, and again, this I think could be a great segue because I'd love to learn how you guys approach it with Beam.ai and what the platform provides. But I'm just curious from the perspective whether or not companies, small or big, will be creating their own agents, and it's something that they have to build from the inside versus having kind of self-serving platforms that allow them to just use agents that are already predefined and pre-trained for specific tasks.
It's not so easy to answer a question. So and it's a bit more nuanced. So we do see both. So we have clients like massive enterprise like Hitachi, for example. So they kind of have big automation departments, and for them it's also, hey, we want to build agents ourselves. Because we have I don't know, 5,000 different use cases. So we need to be able to cover them, and you don't have the capacity to do all of that. We also have like large automotive suppliers that say, hey, look, or OEMs that say, look, we have so many cases. Start with the first one. But really, then what this is about, you need to make it as easy as possible to create these agents, or you need to be able to create them automatically. So far, it was about building agents. So this was the first stage, like building automations. Then the second phase was, I need to be able to evaluate the agents so that I know whether it's doing something correctly instantly. And third now is a lot about task mining. Task mining, understanding processes in an organization, and then creating the agents themselves. So we right now are in a stage where we say we have this high touch sales. So we work with our customers together and essentially help them to get the job done. So they don't buy like just a platform. They buy essentially, hey, I have a certain job that I need to be able to automate 100%, and we help them with that. Now we work in two different directions. On the one side, we say we want to make the agents more capable so we can do more jobs. Second is we need to reduce time to value. And now in some agents, we can get this down to a couple of hours or minutes even in order to set the agent up. But in some cases, it just takes longer. And this is what we also want to reduce. So ultimately, then if we kind of have the technical things solved, it comes down to the capabilities that you have in companies. And there we also see both. We have some companies that say, hey, look, we kind of want to build this. We want to get trained on this. It's just like core for us. And other companies are like, hey, look, we don't have the people anyway. So you just build it, and then that's also fine.
But if you take that question, would you say there's any or what would you say is the main prerequisites you need to have as a company to get started with building agents? Is it on a very technical and the data level? Is it on an organization level? Or where would you say, if you look at your, let's say, customers and people using Beam.ai, and I'm really looking forward to deep dive on that one afterwards. But so what is really the main prerequisites you need to make sure you are capable of as an enterprise to start like scaling agents, like building one probably everybody can do, but like doing it in that way you just described, or getting into that vision of them really building themselves at one point?
So first, I would say not everybody can build properly working agents yet. So it depends on the use case. You can build an agent that answers your emails. That's easy, like to set up, but it's also hard to do incredibly well, because from time to time you get emails where the agent doesn't have the context, so it cannot answer it, and then it needs to ask you. Now, more complex agents are not that easy to set up yet. We're making it easier and easier, but and now we have customers that do it on their own, but you need a certain technical affinity in order to do it. Now, in order to build the first agent in the organization, there's not a lot that you need. You just need to get started, and you need to have a very clear understanding more what is the job that you want to do. And if you have that, it's actually fairly easy, because we have customers that come to us and be like, hey, look, we have 40 different cases, and then we'll go hey, look, first 28 don't really make sense. It's probably not even agents, and it's probably something else completely. So don't worry. And also we don't do it, but let's start with that case. And there's always one case that you can do, and then you expand from there. And this is also what we see with our clients. We start with the easiest stuff there, like we do email triage for our customers. So they have an inbox, and they have many different invoices that get to this inbox, and then they need to, because they have 20 different subsidiaries, they need to send it to different departments, and then they need to put it into SAP. But you can start with that one agent that is just doing the email triage, because right now somebody's sitting there and checking, oh, does it belong to my entity that is in Luxembourg, or does it belong to my entity that is in Sweden or whatsoever? And then you start with that, and then you expand from there. And this is also what we advise generally. Keep it as easy as possible and focus on a specific job, where you right now either have a pain, you don't have the capacity in the organization, so maybe it hinders you to grow, or it just is boring and nobody wants to do it, and everybody is happy if it's automated. Then nobody really wants to check emails where it belongs to. So this is definitely a good case to start with that. So now to kind of sum this here, I think if you really want to build and scale agents, you need to have technical capabilities right now, but we're making it easier. And I think in 25, we're going to see that you don't need this anymore. But in terms of how to get started, it's really not that difficult. Just clear focus on a specific use case. I have a pain here, and then you get started with that.
Are there specific criteria that you would advise organizations to evaluate the use cases by, whether or not this is a good use case for agent versus we can just set up an automation that's pretty simple? Or is it more of a case by case?
So generally, and maybe I actually start sharing some slides and we look at it, because that might also help from time to time. Give me 1 second, because we have one slide that very much depicts how we think about the different. You see my screen starting now, right? So this wonderful chart here, if you essentially think about the frequency of a certain job and the complexity of a certain job. And now if you look at it, you typically have RPA, where you do high frequency job where the complexity is somewhat limited. And then you might have external BPOs that do the jobs that are a bit more complex that you can't really automate with RPA. And then employees obviously can do everything, but ideally you want to have your employees at the top doing the stuff that is really hard to do. And now what we see with agents is like twofold. On the one side, we can do jobs that are more complex than with our PA. So like, for example, we have a client that get to like 25% automation. And now with agents, we get to 95% automation in these cases. For example, in sales order, or also in certain types of customer service requests. And that's one advantage. The other advantage is that we can also do tasks that have a lower frequency. So you don't need to hire Accenture and you don't need to hire a big like team in order to set up your automations because it's much, much easier with agents. And so we see that we can also move to the left and do these jobs that are of slightly lower frequency. And I think that fairly much like depicts it. And then the devil is in the detail. There are some jobs that work incredibly well. And others that are a bit harder. And generally, when we think about agents, maybe just also briefly, and then we can go into some other stuff, is like, what are agents really good at? It's ultimately fairly simple. They're good in extracting data, good at writing data, good at reasoning and thinking to a certain extent, and they're good at communicating. And now if you kind of think about this for a bit and think about your daily jobs and what we are doing, you can describe most of the jobs in a way or in a combination, right? If you, for example, do refunds, then you kind of need to extract information from an email, and then you need to think about it, and then you need to write an email back. So this is essentially how we, like in a very basic level, think about it, but it helps to do.
Do you see agents being more, because if you look at chatbots, obviously like a ChatGPT or Claude, they're more versatile, right? So could be done for anything. Anyone can use it on the go. But do you see agents as being more on the personalized aspect of things? Is it more built for specific organizations, for specific use cases versus kind of being a platform that people can hop on and, let's say hire an agent or fire an agent to do some kind of task or process?
So ultimately, we see it like ChatGPT ultimately, or like is more of a co-pilot. But what we really come from is like you have tasks where you say, hey, I want to completely automate it, and maybe I just don't want to have somebody dealing with that. I think it's yeah, maybe it's not very clear in the way how to answer it. Yeah, I think it's blending a bit. But ultimately, we see the ultimate main use of autonomous agents and the type of jobs that you can just like get rid of end to end and really say we do it from A to Z and nobody really has to deal with it.
Are there, do you think, any specific industries from your perspective or experience, especially working with customers, that you see agents being more adapted in, or maybe at a faster rate than other industries?
So generally, we see two main maybe determinants there. So number one is like how regulated is the industry. So obviously, if you're very regulated, then you don't want to put your agents in my banking workflows initially, because it's very regulated and somebody needs to check it. Same for insurances. So you don't want to like pay out the claim 100%, but you can prepare everything. So regulation has its pros, but it has, because there's a lot of stuff that you need to take care of. So the need for automation is higher. On the other side, you also need to be careful what you do end to end. So this is definitely something that we see. Second is like a lot of people have a very like, sometimes they come and then we can automate everything. And we can automate, I don't know, we can do a production forecast. And the thing is, yes, you can, but the type of AI that you need in order to do a predictive forecast for what you want to produce, it's nothing new. It's not, that was around already like 5 years ago. So that's not really a case nowadays for agents. Agents very much build on this, like LLMs ultimately, which is text token prediction, and not time series predictions. And so this is now what leads to the fact that this is mostly applicable in industries where you have like white collar workers and more of the lower skilled white collar workers. So it's not replacing right now the senior analyst or the M&A private equity guy that is incredibly well paid, but all of the interns and one level below, yes, it does. And all of the people that do data extraction, data entry, that they. And now if you think about that, that is like industries like And in insurances, BPOs a lot, where you have a certain set of instructions for white collar workers how to do the job. Then this is what's tackled first right now.
Yeah, exciting. Maybe we can start lifting the curtain a bit and look at Beam.ai and how you do it and how does it look like. Would be very interesting to understand what is the platform you are building and how does it actually then enable people to start this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see my other screen now, right? So this is obviously dark mode because first it's dark here, but no, also because we're a cool startup, but we also have a light version, obviously. But generally, so on our platform, you can set up different spaces, for different type of jobs or different teams. And generally, it's all around essentially building different agents. And you see here a space where essentially we have two different agents. And every agent now follows like fairly the same structure. And you can imagine it in the beginning a bit like an intern. So obviously it also has a dashboard where you can communicate with the agent. It can also now have a conversation as much as I would have it with ChatGPT. But I can also train my agent. So essentially I can train it to do certain stuff and certain jobs. Really, then the core of the agent is essentially getting work done. And for us, this means you give the agent a lot of different tasks essentially to get work done. And what you see here is a sales order agent. So you see here that has many different essentially sales order or order processing requests that it kind of worked on. And what it does essentially in all of this is kind of that it goes in and kind of starts working on these requests. So for example, here you see that it kind of received some information from an order and essentially was triggered. This might be an email, this might be a webhook, or this might be because somewhere a document was uploaded. And then the agent essentially takes this information, it passes all of the relevant information. So in this case, it received as well the PDF. So it kind of takes the context of the email, it takes the PDF, parses all that information. And now essentially is starting to execute the work based on everything that we trained it before. And so here you see that it's a sales order processing. So now the agent essentially does different steps in order to execute this. So it understands it's a sales order. So it's going to extract information about the buyer and the seller. Then it's going to extract information about the product details. And you can always open this here in the sidebar, and then you can essentially see what it has been working on. So first it extracted some information that extracted the product details. And now it kind of essentially realized, okay, I need to check whether these products are actually available. And you see with the icon here now that it didn't use just a GPT tool to kind of extract information, but it used an external integration. So in this case, it used a Google Sheet in order to fetch product data. So it's a bit like now the sales operation person got this email. He extracts the information, sorts everything, and then he's like, okay, now I need to check actually whether these products are available or not. So it goes into the database and fetches the relevant information and then uses that information to kind of consolidate this and ultimately send out an email again to kind of say, hey, look, we have the product or we don't have the product. And then it can use again here, like sending an email and sending this out. And now, this is one example of a specific task, but really what's behind this is essentially the configuration of the agent, that you can imagine it as a way like, hey, look, I baked my employee a bit. So I kind of set this up and how we get there, I'll show you in a second. But it's essentially an overview over the agent. It has certain settings and it has a certain character that we define. So for example, the sales operation agent is very like doing certain things and it's also not doing other things. And then kind of what we do is a bit like in other automations, you essentially train it how to behave in certain ways. So what you see here is you can see this in one way as like skills in the agent. So we essentially teach the agent how to do certain things. For example, if it receives an order, this is how it should behave. If it receives a equipment part query response, whatever that is, it behaves in a certain way and it uses certain tools for that. And this is essentially what we can teach the agent. And within that, we can then define some stuff and we can teach it, hey, look, use that type of database, use that type of information. This is how you should do it, blah, blah, blah. And then the agent has a certain flexibility in how to execute this. And now in order to do this, what it does, it uses all of this kind of things that we set up, but it also uses essentially tools on the one side, and it uses different integrations and its own memory. So we can also teach the agent, for example, how to connect with certain databases, and we can say, hey, look, you can fetch some information from URLs, you can fetch some information from Drive, etc., which is kind of the memory of the agent. And then we just essentially say, hey, look, now we define a trigger, and you can see this agent has multiple triggers. So kind of every time something sees something to the webhook, or every time it receives an email that contains an order, it actually gets to work. And then it uses this and kind of every time essentially executes or starts a new task and gets to work in that. And now you see that it has a lot of stuff that it just completed, but it also has different states, like one, consent required or input required. So in these cases, actually the agent kind of received something and we said, hey, before you actually send out the order, you or somebody as a human has to click accept and actually then say, okay, now everything is correct and you are allowed to do it. So there's certain ways, also for our autonomous agents to essentially do the whole job. And then still somebody has to go in and say, okay, look, I'm fine with this now. And typically what we see with clients is that in the beginning, we set it up and somebody still sits there and presses yes, do this now. And then over time, the agent gets better, and then we can actually take this out and reduce this as well. And then you kind of, as a user, you get kind of different notifications whenever you kind of have something that the agent doesn't know. It might be that in this case, it just needs the confirmation, but there are also certain instances. This is kind of what we train the agent when it doesn't have information, then it asks for it. So for example, here it doesn't have a certain piece of information that it needs in order to execute something, then it asks. So to sum this all up, how you can view it is essentially like you build your intern over time. In the beginning, it's not so capable. Then you train it with different tools, you train it with different integrations, you train it with different data that you can add. The agent is trained to do stuff fully autonomously. But in case it doesn't know something, or in case you told it to check, it actually goes back to the user on the platform and asks for acceptance or for input.
And is the
maybe I'll
input,
pause here.
this is really cool. Is the input also put into a feedback loop where the more input, it acquires, and then the more input the user gives it learns from that input over time and that consent. So then eventually you will need less input from the user moving forward.
Yes. So what you see here is essentially you can either say now, hey, look, this was well done, or you could say on the other side, hey, look, this was not good, well done, you hallucinated, and please don't do it. We don't use this automatically yet, as we don't we could theoretically now take all of the input and say we funnel it back into the agent and learn from it. But the thing is that it's actually not that easy, because humans also give feedback in weird ways. So right now we still need to check it. I'll give you an easy example. So let's say somebody gives feedback on a sales order, and it should have been, I don't know, 5,000 euros. Now it might interpret that feedback and you write, hey, this should have been 5,000 euros. It might interpret this in the wrong way. This is still what we're learning and what we're improving, because now it might mean that every time it's 5,000 or every time it's in euros, where sometimes it should be in dollars. So it's a very delicate topic where we're still learning how to do this best and do this automatically. Right now, we still do it together with the customers. But this is getting better and better, so that we don't have to do this anymore, and then self-learns. Maybe also there's a new iteration of the platform coming where essentially and we have this not 100% in the product yet, where you essentially have here an evaluation of the agent, whether the work that it conducted was actually correct or not. So it self-evaluates, and we can say, look, a sales operation agent or a step that extracts information from a sales order should always contain certain pieces of information. If it doesn't have it, then the evaluation score is not good. So we essentially use simply put, another LLM call or another AI to automatically evaluate whether the agent actually did something correctly or incorrectly. And then we can say, hey, now redo it, or learn from it, or try again.
And go ahead, Stefan. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You go first.
So I was just wondering about the emails part. is it just for the output? It says output. Is it just writing the email or creating the content of the email, or does it also proceed to send the email through your email inbox and whatnot if you gave it that order? So to
It
speak.
completely sends this as well. So what you see, for example, here, it's then natively connected to, I don't know if I think you probably, yeah. So if I now connect this, it will ask natively for my Google. You don't see the pop-up, but it will ask natively in this case for my Google integration, and it will then connect with it, and then it will also send the email. We and essentially what we do is now my light turned off. But so essentially what it can do in these steps here is that on the one side, somebody's actually, so you see here, these icons are essentially like easy prompts, and here it actually then creates a Google Doc, and then it does that completely.
Yeah, and the Google Doc lives in your Google Drive, so there's no deliverables folder here on the platform. It all lives in different tools.
It lives mostly in different tools. So, I mean, like the majority you see here, a couple of the tools that we already have, there's a lot more. So we then funnel back something in Zendesk, we some like obviously SAP somewhere, or we put data into HubSpot. So it's essentially using different systems. And now for us over time, it's obviously getting better in like conducting the work, and then it saves stuff in its own database, and then we don't need the external systems anymore. But it connects with everything pretty seamlessly. And on the one side, we have all of these standard integrations, but now if you go to companies, there's a lot of different tools that are updated or not updated. So we also have a custom integration module that we can use in order to connect all sorts of different systems.
Very, very cool interface also. Maybe so the agents, do they use a certain, let's say, selection or variety of models that you propose, or is it free of choice for the users, or how do you support people or users to choose the best model for the task?
So there's two things. So number one is like if we go back quickly to our agents, it's a fairly complicated system. So it's essentially using different LLMs in different parts of the module. So you need to like what's behind all of this for this to actually work. We kind of mimic a bit the human brain, right? So we kind of have an orchestration layer that is responsible for planning tasks. We have an action layer that is responsible for executing, etc. And we have like a database or memory layer, knowledge layer that is responsible for retrieving information. Now, what we do in each of these different parts is we kind of use the best model we can find for whatever the task is. So, for example, knowledge layer, we use Cohere still for RAG. It's really good. For the orchestration layer, this is something where always the latest models like make an impact. So we use 4.0 there. And now in the action layer, we don't really need it. You can use any sort of LLM and you can switch it out. Generally, we're fairly independent, so we can swap out LLMs. But then we can also kind of build different tools, and depending on whatever is required. For example, if we do medical use cases, we might use a medical LLM essentially to print out. We might not use a medical LLM to do planning, which wouldn't be beneficial, but we use the medical LLM essentially to plan stuff and get it working. I actually see that there are some Q&A. So just sorry, now we have it. This is essentially a tool that we use for creating prompts or tools within the agent. So it's a bit like your ChatGPT prompt. We only do this automatically and kind of fine tune it. And if I now type in, hey, I want to have an invoice reconciliation tool, I can check like whatever model I want to use for it. And I might use Biolama, but it's probably not the best for this task at hand. But what you essentially see is that the agent now kind of constructed itself a tool to do invoice reconciliation. And now we can use this and give this to the agent as a tool, as a capability to use.
We had a question before, but I think maybe you kind of answered it. But I don't know if you want to add more to it, but how would you describe the difference between agents that can be built and used on Flowise versus the pro agents you're creating? I think you kind of
was already a bit ago. I see it now as well. So generally now we see there are obviously all of these older like workflow builders, which are just by itself, it's a very different architecture. So obviously now you can take workflows and then you inject AI in the different systems, but then you cannot really do self-evaluation, self-healing, etc., because the system itself is not really one organism essentially. And we see that this is needed. So you kind of need to recreate it. And the deeper you go into it, the more you realize that it's not that easy to go from the old system and UI path and just say, oh, I now build an agent because the system is not built in this way. And so ultimately this is different, and it comes with like certain limitations to the older systems and newer systems. Ultimately, what we aim for is to build the system that is self-learning, self-developing, that gets better and better and better, and can essentially integrate into all of these different systems, which you can just do with the old generation. And should I maybe just answer the second question as well?
Yeah, I think
So
that's especially that you mentioned all the health care topics and everything. I think that's when it came up. I think it's an important one, definitely.
Yeah. So generally, data privacy and security is actually not so much challenge anymore. So obviously, we also build on the big cloud providers, and we can deploy on Azure or we can deploy on AWS or whatsoever. And then in terms of data protection, it depends. So for example, in the medical case, we do not really store the data in the agent, which is like good for privacy reason, but bad for learning reasons, because now the agent cannot learn on history, etc. But for example, then we wouldn't store the data or patient data in the agent, but this would be in an external system. And now we can configure the agent, for example, that the agent that the data is just requested every time, and it calls an external database, and then we use one integration essentially to ask for that information. And now with this kind of construct, you can build it so that you kind of fulfill all of the privacy requirements. Actually, it's not always 100% easy, because in the end you need an LLM, but then you can also do a custom LLM that doesn't. Obviously not OpenAI and sends to the US or so, and then you can do this. Yeah.
And then the last question was around pricing, I'm guessing for Beam.ai.
So generally, we do pricing in twofold. So on the one side, there's just a usage component. So if you say, hey, look, I want to do, I don't know, 20,000 tasks, then it's a token-based system as well. The other component is essentially that we package agents. If we build this for customer as an agent, and that starts with like 1,000 a month and then goes up. And then you can use this for various types of automations. Depends a bit on the case. But smallest cases we do are like typically 1,000 plus a month, and then we move up.
Yeah, and maybe you can also drop any information on the chat or emails that people can reach out to if they're interested in booking a demo or learning more about the product. And I know we're coming up on time soon here, so I wanted to also just cover a little bit about what we should expect for 2025. I know this is something that a lot of people are talking about and thinking, okay, what's next? How do we get prepared? How do we not miss out on the next wave of AI? So I'm curious your thoughts and what you would kind of advise organizations on how to prepare for 2025 in the age of AI.
Yeah. So kind of if I go a bit back to the presentation, what we always say is that AI is developing exponentially, and this is kind of, I mentioned in the beginning this block. So if you didn't read it yet, do it. But essentially, kind of you on the one side you think, oh, that's really cool. It can do like small tricks, and it starts like maybe it works, but it's not really there yet. And then very shortly after, you're like, what the heck is this? It's crazy good. And we see this essentially now pretty much everywhere. It's like it started with images and videos, etc. And you're like, oh yeah, it's not really working. And then suddenly a year later, it was working incredibly well. And like we see this obviously now that some people are like, yeah, but I'm going to wait, it's going to get better, etc. But the thing is that this exponential growth kind of compounds, and then at a certain point, it's really, really hard to catch up, because like others are using it and they're faster and faster and faster, and then you're behind, and then you don't, And so we have one customer, for example, they're already pretty good. Their EBIT margin is really crazy, but now they're starting to automate all of the rest as well with us. And it's like the effect on their EBIT margin is going to be crazy. And then they can actually reduce pricing. And then suddenly they can outbid everybody in the market, because like others are not doing it as aggressively yet. And I think 25 is really going to be the year where we're going to see some of these early examples, how people that are actually using it incredibly well create a lot of value for their companies, and others are starting to fall behind. And I mean, now we see like Klarna with their IPO, that I had like strongly pushing on it, and you see that on their bottom line. And I think that we're going to see this more in across different industries. I think second, on the technical side, there's still a lot of stuff to build. It's not that this is done and we're at the end of it. So it's still fairly early for some parts. But then people are like, yeah, they ask me like, are you excited about the next generation of foundational models? And I'm like, yeah, not really, because like most of the things that we want to do, we can do somehow. It just maybe takes too long. And so I think it's going to get easier and easier and easier to use AI agents, and also build them. But a lot of the stuff is already there. It's a lot now about making it seamless, making it easier to use, which will be 2025. But you're going to see them everywhere. It's such a mess. It's insane what advantages you can have if you use AI and AI agents to your fullest. It's absolutely insane. I've done a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff, but it's just it's mind blowing sometimes. If you don't expect like, hey, look, I put all my data in and it gives me crazy answers. No, that's not it. You need to know where to use it. But if you use that well, the effect is crazy.
Yeah.
You mentioned all the way in the beginning that you think one of the next steps is that agents will create themselves once they observe the workflow or understand the workflow better. Do you think that is something we already see next year, or?
Yes,
definitely. Okay.
It's like what we spend all our time on. Like I think in the beginning maybe in the beginning our vision was a bit too crazy, and then we saw this is actually not working, but now we're kind of getting back to it, and now agents create agents, and we use this in smaller scale now internally. So let's say I don't know, you fill out a form, then we use the data, then we can use this to kind of construct our platform, and we can say, hey, look, these are the agents that are going to be relevant for you. And then we can already construct them based on whatever. Like you just need the industry, we need the URL, and then we can also estimate a lot of things. And now if you do this well, it already gets you pretty far. And now we kind of start to inject more data and understanding more from users and systems, like how do processes work, what are the tasks that are being done. And this is going to work. I think we're going to see it in Q1. Probably not done yet, but Q2, Q3, definitely.
Very cool.
In different forms.
Mm-hmm. And last question is it maybe fair to think that with AI agents developing faster and faster, that's going to also kill a lot of AI softwares or chatbots or just even regular softwares that a lot of people use to either automate things or, for example, I'm in a content space and there's so many steps to every content lifecycle, and I use so many different tools. But if an agent is able to kind of consolidate a lot of that work into an agentic workflow, then I see at least a lot of these softwares becoming irrelevant.
Yeah, and it's really hard to make predictions about this. It's like from my view, we like we see cases with customers that use a certain software, and now they're like, okay, but the software becomes just a database where data is stored, because then anyway, like the agent just calls it, and then there's nothing left of the software than the database and the endpoint where we request that. And so that's going to fall. You don't need that piece of software anymore, really. Yeah. There are obviously some automations that are still in there, and now the question is somebody going to invest the time to rewrite this and connect it to another system? So it's like it's going to be very interesting to see case by case. It's also going to be interesting because a lot of software is built for humans. Yeah, it's built for us. But like agents can talk to agents and they just communicate via an API. So it doesn't really matter anymore how the user interface looks like. So that's going to be very interesting to see as well. And then like we're going to see like certain industry, like content is really interesting. Yeah, because content, like we created so many SEO articles, yeah, in the beginning about AI agents before it was cool, and now this helps us, yeah, because we get a lot of inbound and people type in AI agent for XYZ and they land on our website, yeah, and it's really cool. And a lot of people now discount content and say, oh, that's actually over, the era is over. But the reality, we see it works still, yeah. And this is why it's sometimes really hard to make predictions, because it can on the one side it devalues content, on the other side you can also use it still to your advantage. And I think this is really the difficult environment that we're in. Like AI devalues a lot of stuff, at the same time it also makes it easier. So what is the net effect? And you really need to dig into to understand this well.
Yeah, interesting times. Stefan, do you have any more questions?
No, not here. I don't know if the audience has any more questions. Then now is the time to post them. Otherwise, thank you very much, Jonas. It was very impressive.
Yeah, really interesting. And thank you for taking the time to walk us through this. This is one of the most fascinating subjects I've been digging into a lot, especially, like I said, in the content space. So it's interesting to see other people who have actually dealt with a lot of those challenges of building an agent and what comes with it. Really cool platform. And
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
too, where people can find you or reach out to you, that would be great while we have some more.
Yeah, I'm actually, I think I'm fairly easy to find. So either on LinkedIn or just on the website. And my email is also just Jonas at Beam.ai. So feel free to reach out, chat. I'm happy always to discuss all sorts of different use cases. Would love to.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate your time, and thank you again for walking us through the platform and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank everyone.